in the very early days of figuring out what to work on. How did you navigate those -1 days for Ola?
For me, that -1 journey was just about the connect with building in India for India as part of this whole Indian dream. We pretty much became India's largest ride-hailing company through that journey.
Since you've done this -1 to 0 not once but a few times now, what's your mental model to actually navigate the leap?
I think in India, we don't appreciate technology enough. There needs to be much deeper public debate about AI in India. There's hardly any debate about AI in India.
This is what Prateek and I are trying to change through SPC in India. We want people to build things that are technically hard. Let us go build like electric vehicles. Let us build AI chips. Let us go build drones. Let us build rockets. Let us build all of these things that are technologically hard, because to your point, technology is what really leapfrogs a country. Deep technical innovation. Hello and welcome to the -1 podcast, where we ask the most interesting people in the world about times in their lives where they've had to answer the question we all eventually struggle with: what's next? Because before you launch at 0, you have to decide what to work on at -1. I'm your host, Aditya Aggarwal, partner at South Park Commons, and I'm excited to be joined today by Prateek Mehta, who's our founding partner for SPC India, and Bhavish Aggarwal, a dear friend and the co-founder and CEO of Ola Cabs, a company that has fundamentally transformed mobility in India and beyond. Bhavish, welcome to the show.
Aditya, wonderful to be part of your show. Really looking forward to our conversation. I love your concept of -1 to 0. I think it's a unique concept. One had heard about 0 to 1, 1 to 10 and all that, but actually life begins at -1. So it's great that you brought this concept to India.
Maybe to then kick things off in -1 fashion, is there a phrase that you think best sums up the chaos of building Ola in the -1 days? Take us back, like when you were in the very early days of figuring out what to work on. How did you navigate those -1 days for Ola?
So I had a very typical Indian childhood, middle class Indian childhood. Parents were doctors. They wanted me to study, work hard and study, and become a professional in my life. So I studied hard, went to IIT Bombay. Prateek was my senior over there. Luckily, Prateek didn't get a chance to rag me in college.
My loss.
Yeah, so I went to IIT Bombay, one of the best engineering colleges in India, and then graduated in 2008 and worked for 2 years in Microsoft research. So got a good grounding into technology research, science also a little bit at both IIT as well as my first job, Microsoft. But through this journey, I always had this was a period where India was also kind of coming into its own. India's narrative, India's opportunity, and if I can say, the Indian dream. Like, we're all celebrating the American dream these days, but there is an Indian dream also. And the Indian dream was kind of getting having a renaissance period in that time. Late 2000s, early 2010s, and we're right now, I believe, only amplifying the Indian dream. So that was a period when startups were just starting to happen. Flipkart had just been founded by Sachin and Bini. Other large Indian enterprises, traditional companies like Tata's, Reliance's, etc., were starting to scale beyond just being in their respective sectors. So that was when I was a young 24-year-old kid, and I said, time to do something. Let's not waste our life working for a large global MNC. This is the time to be part of the Indian dream. And then that's how, for me, that -1 journey was just about the connect with building in India for India as part of this whole Indian dream. And that's how I got started. 2010 is when I founded Ola. And we started by what every 24-year-old knows how to do best, build an app. Back then, though, building apps was quite novel. So we pretty much became India's largest ride-hailing company through that journey, through the last decade. And while building that, I also realized, what happens as, most of us entrepreneurs know, that as we proceed on our journey, we learn more about ourselves and we learn more about the purpose which we feel inside, but maybe can't articulate as well in our early days. So as I built Ola Cabs, I realized actually I'm, generally two things excite me. One is this Indian dream. And the Indian dream has only gotten more clarified over the years in the Indian context, with the Prime Minister here, Narendra Modi, having a vision for developed India or a Viksit Bharat by 2047. So that's something I very deeply personally connect with. And second is technology. I'm a had I not been an entrepreneur, I would have been a professor at some university. And I actually love technology very horizontally across sectors. So over the years, then we pivoted the Ola group into multiple technology sectors. So today we actually have three large companies. One in the consumer tech space, which is the ride-hailing company. Second is in the EV space. We are India's largest EV company. We make vehicles as well as the lithium cells and the battery energy storage technologies. And third, which is the most recent, is AI, where again we're building full stack.
Well, I have so many questions, but by the way, everyone, one of my highlights of 2024 was visiting your incredible kind of like factories where you were building the mobility solutions. I think it was just about 2 months ago that I had the chance to go there, Bhavish, and reflecting back on it, it wasn't just incredibly cool from a technical perspective, but I also think looking back, it's actually a matter of pride to see the amount of kind of like incredible number of people that were working there and the number of like incredible machines that were kind of rolling off the assembly line on a daily basis. I'm not officially involved with the company, but it left me with a sense of pride, I think, as now that I think back upon it. So thank you for arranging that. That was actually one of my highlights of 2024. But Bhavish, let me go back to 2010, because nowadays it is socially, I would say, celebrated, definitely acceptable, celebrated to be an entrepreneur, right? Even sexy. Uh, but back in 2010, you had to be a little bit of a rebel to actually start a company. And by the way, this is also one of the reasons why it was so exciting that we get the chance to work with Prateek, because Prateek is even crazier than you. He also started two companies in like, by the time before, two or three companies before he came to SPC. So I guess what I'm trying to understand is like, did you always just have like, listen, this is what I want to do. I'm going to march to my own tune. Did you have a very strong kind of like inner kind of like moral or maybe like calling or compass? Because as to your point, as you figure out more about yourself as you kind of go through the journey, reflect back in 2010 to the younger you. What do you now see in that person that helped you start off in the journey?
Actually, Aditya, from an Indian perspective, no, starting up in 2010 was even more taboo, if I can call it, or it was not the typical path. So I remember 2010 when I decided to start up. My parents were quite worried, and one of their worries were obviously, am I throwing up my career? They wanted me to go to the US and study, do a PhD or an MBA, whatever, in the typical path which middle class Indians would follow. And one of their worries also was that how will this boy get married now? Who will marry him? I don't know whether your audience will relate to this, but this is a very, very genuine. This used to be a very genuine Indian parent worry for young kids. So 2010, that is what this scenario was, and I'm actually, by the way, so happy that the country has evolved a lot from there. Where starting up is the sexiest thing you can do, even in India.
It's incredible.
The success of entrepreneurs, the success of even TV shows like Shark Tank India and all of these things. Now starting up is the thing to do. If you're not starting up, you're not cool enough. So if you're starting up, no matter whether your startup is successful or not, you'll find a very nice wife. Unfortunately, people are maybe starting up for the wrong reasons now.
Listen, I don't know, Mark Zuckerberg aside, the real reason I joined the startup was to marry Ruchi Sangvi. Okay, so I'm just saying.
See, we all have our hidden reasons. So, back then, 15 years ago, that was the Indian reality. And, the country has changed a lot since then. For me personally, the journey, the decision to start up was actually a very instinctive one. Like I think, Aditya, for most of us, right? Who, when we start up and, many people feel the reason for starting up is either fame or money or whatever. I think those things, those rationalizations come later. It's actually an instinct you feel, and you feel a connect with a certain higher purpose. So for me, that higher purpose was the Indian dream, and I did feel that that gravitational pull or magnetic pull towards doing it, doing my part in it, and that is how I got in. And many of my friends, family, etc. back then were quite worried about me. This is 2010, by the way, when Even Uber was just very, very small. So when I started off, we had a very organic idea. We didn't. It was not like we were building the Uber for India. So when I used to share with my friends, okay, I'm going to build this. Back then, it was a website. My vision was a website for cabs and all of that. They're like, "The taxi driver ban raha hai." They couldn't understand what this was. And then I was like, let me first build it, then I'll talk to you guys. But India has come a long way from there.
Bhavish, you've also come a long way from there, right? So I think two questions as a follow up. Since you've done this -1 to 0, not once, but a few times now, and some of those bets have worked out spectacularly well, and some of those bets might have not panned out the way you might have imagined. So, would be curious to know in terms of what's a mental model to actually navigate the leap, right? From the -1 to 0, especially when initially you might just have the promise and some of the there are enough unknowns in the equation, right? So how do you go about doing that? And a follow up to that would be that how have you evolved over the years as a leader, right? And how has your approach to that -1 to 0 changed with the experience of building things over and over again?
Pratik, I think very, very good question. We all evolve, and my own approach, mental model, leadership approach, whatever, has evolved a lot in the last decade and a half. When I was just starting up, and the whole thing about what can we do was very intuitive as a consumer. Okay, acha, I need taxis in India, so I'll start with a taxi solution. After that, we will just build deeper and deeper into that industry. But now, actually, sitting at the vantage point where we are, one can really understand the broader technological themes very deeply, and also the kind of like a fork in the road moment for India, about really being a part of the technology future versus being just missing the revolution once again. So if you see in India's journey, we have unfortunately so in the last couple of centuries missed a few revolutions. We missed the first industrial revolution and we got colonized. We missed the subsequent innovations of the information age in the late 1800s, early 1900s. We largely missed the manufacturing globalization the last few decades. Uh, we've thankfully had some positives. We've built the IT services ecosystem in India. India has been a hub for talent, but now you can see, the way my mental model now for the future of India and the future of technology is that there are two or three major technology platform revolutions happening, and India needs to be a core part of it. And actually, it's not just from an Indian vantage point. India is 20% of the world. In India, India is 1 in 5 people are Indians. On this call, 3 in 3 people are Indians. so,
Yeah.
so 1 in 5 people are Indians. So there are a lot of us, and we need to make ourselves useful to the world. And as India develops, India's relevance for the world is very high. And India is a great microcosm for the rest of the less developed world, like Africa, Southeast Asia, even Latin America, etc. So, India's journey in that sense for the global south is very meaningful. There are two technology platforms that I see very relevant today. One is what's happening with AI, and its linked ecosystems like robotics, humanoids, etc., and the deployment of AI into medical science, etc. That's one big revolution. US is leading that, and India has to find its own path in place in that. The second piece actually is the revolution in energy. Electric vehicles is an application of the energy technology. It's not it's not the technology in itself. It's the application. Battery energy storage, grid storage, lithium technologies, hydrogen, nuclear, etc. So in the world of energy, actually China is the leader, whether we all like it or not. The Chinese are world leaders in the world of energy, and the rest of the world, including the West, is trying to learn from the Chinese. Now, India is a very important country of consequence for the world, given we spoke about the scale of India and the Indian ethos, the traditional Indian civilizational ethos of the whole world as one family. India doesn't yet have enough scale or participation in these two energy revolutions, and these two are also converging. They're also influencing each other. Like for AI, you need energy. In the US, the biggest debates are around electricity now, etc. And for energy is now not a commodity that you mine anymore, but it's technology and how to harness the power of whether it's the nuclear atom or whether it's the chemical energy inside a lithium battery. That's material science. So AI is actually amplifying better batteries for the future, and so these two are reinforcing each other. And India has the relevance, the talent, the market size, etc., to be a major part of this future technology platform. And that's my mission in life, to be part of this Indian dream in this lens of the future technologies. So that's how, by the way, the mental model is, Pratik, to come back to your question. There are so many big changes happening in the world now. We in India as an ecosystem need to participate in it. And what can Ola do to really build platforms which catalyze the whole Indian ecosystem? Uh, Looking back, when I was 10 years younger, the mental model was simple. As a consumer, what problem do I feel in daily life? Which is also, by the way, a great mental model. In the end, the consumer is at the heart of any innovation you do. Yeah, so it's been and I've had my failures. We've tried to do a few things, we've learned from it. And my biggest learning actually has been whenever I've tried to do things with just a FOMO perspective, we've always failed. Whereas when we've tried to uh, try and bring a next generation approach to doing things, or a next technological innovation to doing things, we've always succeeded. And that's also, in a way, the rules of the universe. No, if you're doing things which have already been done or somebody else is doing, and you're just trying to catch up because of vanity or ego, you will not be the most successful. Whereas if you're bringing some secret sauce or some new thing or some extra to the conversation, then that extra will be valued.
By the way, that's a fantastic answer. Thank you for sharing that. But you said something earlier, Bhavish, that really resonated. That I've also thought a lot about in my own journey, which is that post facto, it's sometimes easy to tie a narrative thread through your life. Something happened, and then I did this, and then I did that. Then when I look back in the spur of the moment, a lot of it is driven by some combination of instinct and also like a sense of like it just kind of makes sense. Like this, it's not even an actual like, and oftentimes rationality is trying to convince you out of doing the thing that just instinctively makes sense, right? And oftentimes when I tell founders, is like, listen, guys, doing a startup is actually not rational, right? Like it is actually quite a irrational thing to do if you are trying to maximize in some ways in the medium term for making money, maybe finding a wife, all of those things. People just don't listen to that voice in themselves because they need to see like a rational through line. So I guess, would you say, Bhavish, I mean, I find it incredible that you have done Ola cabs, Ola like EVs, and Krutrim, right? Which is still India's leading AI lab, right? In terms of what they're building.
Yeah.
I think you have identified one really interesting property of the problems, which is that you do best when you're taking a big leap forward. You're not trying to do like a Me Too product. You're actually trying to do something that feels like pretty big leap. But would you say that you also operate from gut, like from like a sense of like this feels right, or like what is that combination of rationality and kind of instinct that you tend to use to navigate the world?
Brilliant point, and I'll go a little bit into philosophy on this one also.
Please, yeah.
I think in our modern life, we overestimate rationality and underestimate instinct and gut and whatever those kind of themes, right? And I think this is because in the Western way of looking at the Western philosophies, rationality has had a very high pedestal, and rightly so. Rationality is a very important part of human society and human life, and there's enough things we need to be logical and rational about. But if I take a like a Hindu Indian philosophical perspective on this, our five senses need not be complete in experiencing the energy of the universe, right? And by the way, we know this. Our eyes have a limited bandwidth. The ears have a limited frequency they can hear. There's so much quantum energy out there which we cannot perceive with our senses, but fundamentally we can connect to it through a non five senses way, which is what the Indian chakra system, as an example, or the different energy centers of the body are. Yoga, meditation, etc., opens you to the energy of the universe, right? And this is what our ancestors have been following for millennia. And the Western rationality might laugh this off, but maybe that's what in the English language gut and instinct is. It's just you feeling the energy around you in a way that you can't explain, right? And I'm a big believer in gut and instinct, and I'm a big believer in uh, connecting with the universe around you to and many times the universe tells you what to do, and you just need to do it, and you're an instrument of the universe in that sense, instead of you being the captain of the boat rowing against the tide. That's a very individual heroic narrative, whereas some of our Indian philosophical narratives have been that you're just an instrument of the universe. So that and the universe, by the way, and this kind of articulation is not at odds with a rational technology perspective, because I think one of the truths of the universe is that technology only improves and technology only moves forward. And the only way to create economic value for a society is by adopting new technology, in my view. Because what is economic value? It's only the growth of productivity is new economic value, and productivity growth happens with new technologies, and new technologies keep making things cheaper. So for me, my decisions are driven by gut and instinct, and over the years, I've learned to hone it better. I've learned to understand when, as a founder, you can have your whims and say, "Oh, my whims are my gut, and my team should listen to it." That's actually just vanity and ego.
It's a fine line. I mean, absolutely right. It's a fine line between understanding that. I mean, it's really, I mean, one of the things that I find not comical, but I find very interesting is the fact that these AI models are intrinsically, we have no idea why they work. Their intelligence is an emergent property. And I think it's very hard for, in some ways, Western philosophy. There's all this hand wringing around, like, oh my God, are they intelligent? Are they not intelligent? And for
Yeah.
me, I'm just like, listen, they seem very like capable and intelligent. I don't need to understand it in order to appreciate it. Whereas I think that the Western, in some ways, philosophy really struggles with that, like not being the principal agent in the room.
Actually, I have a point on this, Aditya.
Please, please.
It's very simplistic mental model I have on this argument about, does AI have consciousness, right? Or does it have genuine intelligence? And firstly, we need to define intelligence, or we need to define consciousness. But if you can define it, if you can define consciousness in words or in any kind of language, words, mathematics, physics, whatever, then you can have an AI model learn the data patterns of it, right? So if consciousness cannot be described, then AI can't learn it. So maybe it's a very simple model, but I feel we as humans are still coming to terms with our consciousness. We don't know what it is. There's no proper definition of consciousness, because it's also not just explained, but experienced.
Yes. I mean, this is actually one of my points, which is that I feel like human beings, in some ways, the amount of multimodal data that we are taking in is not just through the five senses, but it is literally through our body as well. Like, we are actually getting data from our organs, from our internal kind of like representation that we are feeding into whatever model that we have in our brain. But we need to be comfortable knowing that our bodies are actually incredibly multimodal, much more so than kind of like even what we can feed into these systems, these computer systems. And that's great. That means like we are capable of like processing all of this in like a slightly different, higher dimensionality way. I do think that like in as we go further down this like AI, I would say not rabbit hole, but kind of like this AI world, I think we will actually gain a much finer appreciation for, in some ways, a lot of like the Eastern philosophies and their way of thinking about the world and what it means to be a conscious higher being, right? In a way that I think is not going to be adequately explained by Western theology or Western philosophy.
Fully agree, Aditya. And I think this is a great time for philosophy. Philosophy actually, I think, died over the last century. Or innovation in philosophy, or advancements in philosophy, or conversations around philosophy reduced because we became rational.
Yeah, most philosophy over the last 100 years has felt like basically applied mathematics, right?
Yeah.
And like you actually want to like zoom out and have the deeper, like, spiritual conversation.
Absolutely. And then if you think of the leading scientists in the middle of the last century, a lot of them were fairly deep into Indian philosophies. Yeah, and I think there's going to be a resurgence of philosophy in general, as you very very brilliantly said, that AI is going to make humanity come to terms with these questions of what is consciousness, what is the way to deal with our consciousness. How do we enhance consciousness? Another way to think of this is, right now people worry about the impact of AI on jobs. Actually, I think that's not the most relevant debate in a few years. Obviously, countries, companies, economies will have to answer what are the jobs of the future. But market forces will settle somewhere. In the end, as long as there is productivity in the economy, there is value creation or wealth creation, and then there could be either jobs or some way of distributing that income through government measures, UBI or whatever. Right. So we will find a new way of equilibrium on economic management of the society, because our lives in the post-industrial era have been defined by a job or by doing something. So that is the real thing which will bring a lot more creativity out of humanity, I feel.
Just talk us through your vision for Krutrim.
Yeah.
This is your latest minus one, I would say, effort, and now obviously it's become a big thing. So walk us through, like, how did you come about it? What are your kind of like main goals behind it? How should the audience think about what you're trying to achieve with it?
So our mission, or I like to call it purpose. Our purpose with Krutrim is to make India the most productive economy in the world through deploying AI across the country. And one needs to understand, or your audience will need to understand the Indian context to really understand how Krutrim fits in, because uh, the Western context or even the Chinese context is very different. The Indian context is that we are today a $4 trillion economy. Our per capita GDP is about $2,500. In comparison, the US is a $30 trillion economy. Per capita GDP is about $70,000-$80,000. So India is a very poor country compared to, or a low income country compared to, but it's growing fast. The economy is growing, per capita GDP is growing. Another metric to look at is the penetration of compute in the economy. And the whole software industry exists to amplify human productivity. That's the reason software is built, that you can do things better, faster, you can get the computer to do things. So how much software do we consume in India, or how much computing do we consume in India? Compared to the US, US has a $500 billion software and computing market revenue. India has a $20-30 billion software revenue market. As a percentage of GDP, India's software market or computing market is about 0.5%. US is 2%. Per capita, India consumes about $10 of compute every year. US consumes about $1,000 of compute every year. So 100x. Right. So, and this shows how our economy in the previous waves of computerization or software building, SaaS or whatever, has not really deployed enough computing productively. Now AI is going to change all of that. AI is going to make cost of software much lower, cost of producing software much lower. AI is going to make the ability of using software much easier for the average Indian, because the average Indian is not a programmer. It is going to solve the language barrier in the Indian economy. So, AI is that kind of a turning point for India, where, let's just do a simulation. When India gets to $10 trillion economy, can we make computing a 5% part of the Indian economy, and also hence accelerate the growth of the GDP in India? Right now, our GDP is growing 6-7% a year, or let's say 7-8% a year. If we deploy AI faster, we can grow 12-15% a year. China did that by leveraging the manufacturing outsourcing over the last 2-3 decades.
And that makes a huge difference. If you go from 7-8% to 12-15% compounded growth, it's completely changes the trajectory of the country.
Absolutely. So, if you do the math, 2047, India's 100 years of independence from today is about 23-24 years away. If we grow at 8%, a $4 trillion economy will get to about 20-25 trillion. If you grow at 10%, we get to about 30-35 trillion. If you grow at 12%, we get to 50 trillion.
Wow.
So a 20 trillion versus a 50 trillion outcome is a 8% versus 12% growth rate compounded for 25 years. So, and we can do that with AI in India. To build Indian AI, we need to rethink it from first principles. Today, there is a reason India has less penetration of software and computing, because it's a Western paradigm, Western cost structures, Western product propositions brought into India by leading like iconic companies like Microsoft or Google, etc. But it's not relevant for India in many ways. The cost of computing is too high. India, the per capita GDP of India is very low. We have to bring down the cost. We have to make the AI work for Indian languages, Indian context, Indian knowledge systems, Indian cultural ethos, and all of this needs a lot of work across the stack. So we are building Krutrim across the stack from the AI models, which are more relevant for India. So we are not going to compete with an open AI by building a generalized large language model in terms of a trillion parameters or more. But we are going to focus on building AI models for the Indian reality, be it language, be it different kind of multimodality, different data sets. So we've already launched our first Krutrim model last year, which was the best performing Indian Indic language model. The Krutrim second model is launching this month, end of this month, which will be even better. And we hope to continue to improve to make AI production ready for Indian applications, Indian language, Indian context. That's first layer. Then the next layer is the actual infrastructure, the cloud, the energy, the cooling systems, etc. If you think of India produces the largest amount of digital data in the world because India is the largest population in the world. It's very simple. Data creation is linked to population scale till you do synthetic data. Synthetic data is linked to compute scale, but other data is just linked to population scale. And Indians are very active online thanks to the telecom revolution. So we generate the largest amount of digital data in the world, but we don't own our data. We don't store our data in India. 90% of our data is stored outside India, processed into AI, and brought back into India and sold to us in dollars. It's the same East India company all over again. So, and but it's a global world. It's a capitalistic world. So we have to not build trade barriers or policy barriers. We have to actually out innovate and out compete for the Indian market. It's an open competition. India has the largest number of developers in the world, but how many of them are really building applications for India? Many of them are just part of global MNC centers in India building for the West. India has the largest number of silicon designers in the world. Every chip passes through India, and not physically, but its IP is engineered in India, but there's no Indian chip. So I can go on and on about India's advantage in the computing realm. Krutrim's mission is to bring these advantages of India together to attack the opportunity of India so that we can really amplify economic growth in India. So, and I was saying the first layer is the AI models, second layer is the infrastructure. So we are going to build, today we had the announcement of Stargate, $500 billion. Now, I don't have $500 billion, but yet, but we want to build Indian infrastructure around AI. So the cloud data centers, the energy systems that it needs, the cooling technologies, and we have gotten started with us in a small way already. And then the final layer here is the chip. We need to, and we are building our first, in India's first AI chip. It's going to be taped out next year. In general, while India and the US are very deep partners, and I think geopolitically, India and the US are going to be very relevant for each other through this century. But India still needs to have its destiny in its own hands. A great friendship is when you're not reliant on the other, but you're adding value to the other.
And just switching gears a bit, right? Because you, in some sense, thanks for sharing the large vision, and I think clearly in the Indian startup ecosystem, the all the budding entrepreneurs do look up to all the people who've blazed the trail and are out there to inspire them, right? So one of the things as a founder, especially the fact that founding itself is a fairly lonely journey and it's a tough journey. On most days, it's far more tougher than what it might seem to people outside. I think it what would be useful is that if you can talk to us about how you have dealt with the struggles of being a founder, and over the years, there's of course this vision of founder being a hero, trying to be on this quest. How have you actively recruited people to kind of help you on this journey, right? And how have you built a net around yourself to build great things?
I have a contrarian view on this, and
I love it.
I've heard so many, and I've looked up to so many people, be it Steve Jobs or Elon Musk or Jensen, or in the Indian context, Ratan Tata or Dhirubhai Ambani, etc. When I hear the American narrative around starting up, it's very different from the Indian narrative traditional Indian narrative around business building. You won't hear an Indian traditional businessman say, it's so hard, and if I'm born again, I will not choose this path. Right, but many of the American narrative, and I'm not singling out anybody, but the American narrative is it's so hard that one should never choose it, and if I'm born again, I will not do this. But I know, but I feel if I'm born again, I will do this again because this is my purpose, right? So while it is hard, but anything of value in life is hard. Parenting is hard. Doesn't mean you don't want to be a parent, right? Sports is hard, but doesn't mean Sachin Tendulkar says don't become a cricketer, right? So I think anything of value is hard as long as you are doing it out of purpose and you connect with that purpose. You will be like if I'm born again, I would want to do this all over again, and in fact, I will do it better because I have learnings. so, so I have a slightly counter narrative on this that this is my purpose, and for an entrepreneur, it becomes harder if you're not really aligned to your purpose, and if you don't really feel it, like we had the discussion on gut and instinct. If you don't feel that this is what you're meant to do, right? If you're doing it for making money, if you're doing it for fame, this is the wrong way to get fame or money, right? Because almost always you will find enough reasons along the way which will knock you off, and then you will say, okay, it's too hard, let me not do it. But if you're doing it because it's your life's purpose and if it's your life's mission, then no matter what kind of adversity you face, you will actually, that adversity will only make you stronger because you're clear about why you're doing it.
Interesting.
I mean, maybe to pull on a similar question, I'm curious. I mean, Bhavish, you seem like you're very curious about kind of the founding journey, and you've kind of read up, obviously, on a bunch of folks in Silicon Valley, but then also in the Indian context. Maybe to pull on that thread, what else have you noticed that is maybe unique about great Indian entrepreneurs and founders that maybe is not as present in kind of like the West? I'm actually very curious about that. I mean, I've seen a little bit, the founders who I probably know best in the Indian context are Binny and Sachin, having worked with them at Flipkart. And I definitely see some elements there, but I'm curious to hear from you. What do you see in the best Indian founders that might be unique?
When you say Indian founders, I'll actually refer to the pre-tech founders because I think us tech founders actually are more in the Western mold than the Indian mold. Unfortunately, I think we all have to become more grounded in our Indian ethos also. We should, our generation has the advantage of being a good blend of both because we have enough Western influences. We need to add a little bit more of the Indian influences. But if I think of iconic Indian entrepreneurs, let's say Jamshedji Tata, who founded the Tata Group, or Dhirubhai Ambani, or even now Mukesh Ambani, etc., I think there are a few things which I take away. Firstly, I think there's a lot more, the country's context is much more deeper in their journey than Silicon Valley entrepreneurs. And that's nothing against Silicon Valley entrepreneurs. US is a high income country. I don't think we should call it a developed country anymore. It's, I heard that, and I agree with Donald Trump's thinking on this, that US wants growth, and rightly so. Everybody should want growth. Nothing is developed. There's no full stop. It's all, yeah. But it's a high income country. India in the last century has been, has come out from a massive challenge on suppression, economic suppression, cultural suppression. So the energy of an entrepreneur, let's say the Dhirubhais of the world, or Jamshedji Tata, etc., or even G.D. Birla, who was the founder of the Birla Group, very much around nation building, much stronger around nation building. And I think our generation in India doesn't have that as much yet because we're still young, we're still finding our feet, we're still learning what does technology mean for India. But the fact is, the nation building project for India is not done. In fact, it's only getting started. Right. And that's also, in a sense, the way capitalism will be interpreted in India will have these additional nuances of community, nation, society, more than what I would feel in the West. And if you think of America's journey itself, the Rockefellers, the JP Morgans, etc., when they were building America, that back then America was just coming out of colonization, and they built America in the 19th century or the early parts of the 20th century. And that is the moment in India. And that is the moment the previous industrialists also did. And my generation is also part of that continuum. Right. So in that sense, so that's one aspect. one thing we do need to learn from the Silicon Valley is actually appreciating technology. I think in India we don't appreciate as a country technology enough. There are, we don't have enough debates about the impact technology will have. Like there needs to be much deeper public debate about AI in India. We There's hardly any debate about AI in India, and we feel that, oh, okay, if Chat GPT is available, then what's the deal? We'll use it. So then, what's the difference between India and Nigeria?
I think you hit upon a bunch of points there, Bhavish, that deeply resonate, right? Like maybe first to talk a little bit about Silicon Valley and its ethos. I mean, I think one of the things that unfortunately Silicon Valley for the last 40, 50 years since it got started has really thought of itself as the pirates. We are the bunch of pirates. We build things outside of the system. We are disruptors, right? Like we are not there to try to make the establishment and the institution better. We're there to overthrow and overturn, right? We're much more interested in revolutions. And I think that by that framing of it, and even for the longest time, we had zero interest in working with government because they were like, they were the man, right? Like we're not interested. We want to go and basically subvert them. But I think what that really means is that in our ethos, we don't feel that sense of like pride towards the country. There's no sense of like nation building or doing the right thing for the country, for the populace. Um, but that's changing a little bit. I think actually this new administration is kind of bringing that back. I think that some of the most interesting companies right now are companies like Palantir and Ural. And when you go and talk to people from there, they have this sense of like, yes, we are building things for America to either protect America or to return America to growth. But it's very different in India because you go talk to great entrepreneurs in India and they're often talking about like building the nation, building the country, and that has a sense of like very deep higher purpose and calling. Um, but I'll also resonate with one thing that you said about the Indian ecosystem, which is, and this is what Pratik and I are trying to change, I think, through SPC in India. One of the things is that we want people to build things that are technically hard, that are like technical leaps, right? Like don't just view technology as like the simplest in some ways thing that you can package up for the local kind of consumer. Actually do hard things. Let us go build like, like electric vehicles. Let us build AI chips. Let us go build drones. Let us build rockets. Let us build all of these things that are technologically hard, because to your point, technology is what really leapfrogs a country. Deep technical innovation. I mean, where I was also hoping to take the conversation for like a little bit is that, after visiting your factory, okay, so I'm a software guy. I've built a bunch of software companies. But dude, building software so much easier than the set of things that you had to do to launch, like, electric scooters. Between I was thinking about like, okay, he has to build a factory, he has to have like drivetrain, he has to build the batteries himself, he has a software component, he has like the hardware kind of OS component, he's doing PCBs, he has to do supply chain, he has to do like physical showrooms, he has to do maintenance, and he has like, and I'm just thinking, all I'm doing is building software, man. Like software is actually relatively quite easy relative to like all of the moving parts. So my question to you, Bhavesh, is like, do you not get in some ways intimidated by the breadth and the scope of what you have to build in these things that you take on? Or do you just kind of are like, I'll figure it out, it's okay, I'm not going to get, because I'm not going to worry too much about knowing all the details. I will, if it has to be done, it will be done.
More important than whether it's hard or easy, I think, is whether it's useful and impactful at scale. Right. So, what drives me as an entrepreneur? I think what drives any entrepreneur is, can I have impact at bigger scale? Right. And let's say EVs, and EVs are very important for a country's energy transition and very important for a country's productivity and competitiveness globally. And it'll definitely be hard. And by the way, software is also, while software you think of as easy, I think you're being a little hard on yourself. Yeah, building a software business has its own challenges.
It is a complex machine, yes.
It's a complex machine. If you want to compete and win, it is complex. It is challenging. So I think that the my framing is, how can I have larger impact, bigger impact, faster? And in that sense, I have to do the things I have to for that business, whether it's building a factory. And while there's another advantage you have if you're new to a domain. You approach with foolishness and ask the stupid questions. And actually the stupid questions are the most important ones.
Absolutely. It's like the beginner's mind is such a beautiful mind, like where you are able to come in and not be encumbered by all of the way. It's funny. I tell people that as an executive, you should leave a company if you find yourself being the person who, when a new person comes, you're saying like, oh, we thought about this 5 years ago, this is the reason we said no, this is the reason we said no. Because in your mind all you have is like filled with all of the useless ways dogma, and it's actually what holds companies back, it what holds executives back. So if I like I tell if I tell people, like, whether it be at SPC, if you find me being the guy who's like telling you 3 years ago why we didn't do anything, please disregard what I said and just go ahead and do it, right? Because you should never listen to dogmatic people.
100%, Aditya. Yeah, and it's the beginners. There's a little bliss in being a beginner, right? You have this feeling. All of us have our memory as children, no? And as children, we were beginners in the journey called life. And there's our memories of childhood are largely blissful. Okay, घूम रहे थे, school and this and that. We were enjoying learning. There was a beauty about being curious about everything. And I think one of the tricks of adulting is to just keep that keep that beginner's mindset and keep the child in you, and in whichever way. And I think growing up and becoming an adult unfortunately takes that away from you. And that's true in business and in personal life, right? So I have also gone through that journey where in business I have been dogmatic, and whenever I've looked back and looked at my dogmatic decisions, they've always been underwhelming. Whereas when I've taken first principles decisions based on curiosity, I've always felt that they've turned out much better.
Yes, and without like a fear of updating your priors, you get more information, you can change.
Absolutely. That's the beauty of life, right? Why do you want to carry the baggage of the past? The beauty of life is you're living now and the future.
And this is why, like, when I read online or in the press, like reporting on something that you said or I said like 10 years ago, I'm like, who cares?
Huh, who cares?
Like, that was a 10-year ago version of me. I don't know what information I had. I have so much more information now.
I've tried my hand at the food delivery business 2-3 times. Okay. And the first 2-3 times I failed. And just recently, last year, we began another effort at it. And everybody's like, Abhi, tum teen bari, you failed 3 times. Why are you trying it again? But I'm like, I have a better idea this time. I think I can do it better.
And it's we see this at SPC all the time, because like we come back to ideas that we have considered in some way or form, and now sometimes it wasn't the right time. So you're now is like feels like a much better time, right? Pratik, I have one or two last questions, but I'll hand it over to you to see if you have any more before we kind of wrap up.
Actually, I have two. Since you mentioned that having that beginner's mind and driving that with that sense of purpose and focus, how do you do that at scale? Right. I think it's a model that works very well at a data set of one and maybe with a close set of people. But as you build organizations of scale, and of course, I remember going to a factory a few months back, and we had this discussion at your office again. That how do you build that sense of purpose and authenticity of execution at a scale, and what's your approach to that? And in your specific case, often you are referred to as the founder in the founder mode always. I am just wondering, how does it translate to the core act of org building?
Okay, that's an interesting question, Pratik. Let me think of. No, I think if I there are 2-3 parts of your question, so let me peel one by one. So, how do we build organizational belief in our mission and our purpose, right? I think it starts by hiring and self-selecting those who want to join. And that's actually some of those tactics I've learned from Silicon Valley, by making sure you communicate your culture clearly. And culture does not mean there is a right way or there is a wrong way. There is your way and there is another person's way. Right? So it's just who you are. You just be yourself, be authentic. So my approach to that is being authentic and making sure when we're hiring people who resonate with our authenticity. Doesn't need to mean the same people, the same kind of people. So different people will bring different value systems, and there needs to be a certain breadth of perspectives. But people need to authentically resonate with what we are trying to achieve. That's why we are here. No, in a very first principles way, a company is a set of people achieving the same goal.
Right.
So the same goal needs to be very clear and clearly communicated in its authentic rawness, I feel. And I do that repeatedly. I do that in public forums. I do that internally in meetings. Sometimes it gets too raw, and then I learn from it. But too raw is better than too polished in my view. Any day, I will take too raw. It's true about food also, by the way. The more processed food we take, the bad it is for the body to digest.
Absolutely.
I think that helps. And also, when, and this is something again, the Bay Area or the Silicon Valley has spoken very well about this. But once you have a talent flywheel, the good people get good people, and the bad people get worse people. And I've seen that. I've suffered at it because initially in my journey, I didn't necessarily hire the best. I would have hired the more trophy hires, if I can call them. So, and we've all made those mistakes. But the best need not be the fanciest looking. So we've also built our own ability to identify what works in terms of authenticity, relevance, as well as capability for us. So that this kind of hiring better, and then making sure the work environment inside or the culture inside is no bullshit, zero bullshit, zero bureaucracy. I am, and that's where the founder. You said founder mode, so the founder mode is very relevant. This is new vocabulary for me, but in India, में इसको कहते हैं धंधा, right? Dhanda versus startup.
I was going to say one of the big things, at least about founder mode, that I've seen a lot in you, Bhavish. I actually think that the world is appreciating now that it's okay to micromanage. I wish somebody had told me this when I was younger, because the advice I got was like scale yourself, get out of the details. And I actually think a lot of founder mode is like, no, get into the details where you can make a difference. Like that's actually being a founder.
100%, Aditya. You have to care about it. You have to care, and you cannot just abstract away the caring about the details. And it's actually not it's not a very natural feeling to abstract yourself away from it. But you have to scale while being in the details, right? You do have to scale to do bigger things. And I think scaling means, when I think of the organization, I focus a lot on efficiency and productivity instead of just generally giving low micromanagement or high micromanagement. I think that's the wrong dimension. The right dimension is how do we make a team more productive? How do we make a team more effective? And the ways to do that is to remove internal bureaucracy, remove the layers of decision making. Decisions need to be taken fast instead of the perfect decision being. So, you have to build your organization culture around that. And you can't really codify this beyond a point. The vibe of the organization is like that. So, one thing which I see some companies do, and I don't agree with this, is that list of 10 things, list of 20 things, cultural values, and the new CEO comes, he adds two to it, removes one from it. And I'm like, बहुत सोचा होगा आपने वो दो ऐड करने के लिए. The way I like to do it, and it works for me, is just the vibe has to be that yeah, we do it like this here, guys. And it's not, is it written? No, it's not written. But many countries' constitutions are also not written.
At Facebook, our key saying that I still think to myself is like, perfect is the enemy of good, right? Which is like organizations, it's much better to make a decision quickly, because most doors are not like one-way doors. Like you go, if you make a mistake, you can backtrack, you can come back. If it really is a one-way door, then okay, take a little bit more time. But most of the times, it's actually speed that you want to optimize for, speed and low bureaucracy.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I think people and organizations are tolerant of mistakes, but they're not actually tolerant of like bullshit and actually taking a long time. That's what drives the best people away.
Absolutely, Aditya. And that's my endeavor also, is to build that kind of a vibe in the company that let's move fast, guys. Let's be nimble at scale.
That's amazing. Yeah. Because what you said resonates quite a bit, of both on the macro and micro, communicating it over and over again. Because, yeah, this is one mantra that I have felt works really well, which is only when you're getting tired of saying it is when people have started hearing it and internalizing it. Yeah. So,
Good point. Yeah.
I'm not sure that works so well, but yeah. Yeah. That's a different conversation. One spicy question here before I hand it back to Aditya. So Bhavish, you've been publicly very active, right? Especially online, and taking no bullshit from a lot of people out there, right? And you've picked up battles, which at times, which we also alluded to when we were talking last, right? So I would be curious, what's your model of figuring out which is the one where you want to engage and which is the one that you want to possibly shy away from?
I like to just say what I feel, right? So that's my natural way of engaging. I also feel now that I have a public company and all, I need to balance that a bit. As a young person, I always used to feel authenticity means saying what you feel. But no, authenticity means really doing what it takes to be true to your purpose. Even if it's sometimes doing what it takes, just like this is the Sri Krishna's teaching in the Mahabharata. No, you don't need to be authenticity. Doesn't mean transparency. Authenticity means really caring deeply about your purpose. So I've actually realized sometimes I should not say things I said in the past, or say them differently, or maybe it's not even required. Why pick a fight with every Tom, Dick, and Harry? Right? Dogs will bark. But sometimes picking a fight is also very important.
Yeah, if it's the shortest path, sometimes it's the purpose has to be fulfilled by that.
Yes, absolutely. So you have to have the judgment to know कि अभी लड़ाई करनी है या अभी शांत रहना है.
Well, Bhavish, you are an inspiration to all of us. I mean that sincerely. I think that as I've gotten to know you better, I have more and more kind of respect both for what you've achieved, but also a deep excitement for, I think, what will be built in India, like in the future, right? Like the future is young and the future is bright. So I have no doubt that you will continue to be a main character on the stage. And hopefully, we at South Park Commons will be there to both cheer you on, but to also work alongside you. And I hope that we get to collaborate a bunch in the coming years. But thank you for taking the time to be with us tonight. It's our pleasure.
Thank you so much, Aditya. You are somebody I have also gotten to know recently, and your journey and what you're doing, and you're building your purpose very honestly, and and what you're doing is very very important in especially in the Indian context. Huh? I think you will be one of the key platforms which will catalyze this kind of technology thinking in India, and I really look forward to collaborating and yeah, let's looking forward to doing more things together, guys. And thank you so much for having me.
It's our pleasure. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you. That was another episode of Minus One from the team at South Park Commons. Make sure to subscribe to our show wherever you listen to podcasts and find us on social at South Park Commons. A huge thank you to our friends over at Atomic Growth for making this episode happen, helping us all the way from content research to production and distribution.